Hey everyone, this is Ari, and I'm back with another interview for you, this time with Joe Cohen. So to give you a little bit of background about Joe, he is the owner of a couple websites. One is called Selfdecode, which is a website about biohacking, and the other one's called Selfdecode, which is a really cool website, and the concept is basically to take people's genetic information from like 23andMe and then give them a breakdown about their genes and how that relates to, different potential health outcomes and different lifestyle strategies that can be used to, enhance basically their genetic profile. So let me read Joe's bio here on his website. At the age of 25, Joe was sick, broke, and unemployable. Since biohacking himself from sickness in mid-2013, Joe has become an investor and entrepreneur, founding Selfhacked and Selfdecode. Selfdecode is your personal digital health coach that combines data from genetics, blood tests, and symptoms to render personalized health recommendations. Joe is the owner and main writer at Selfhacked. Joe also consults with high-profile executives, self-hackers, and companies and is writing a book about optimizing health. So with that said, Joe, is there anything that I missed that you would like to add to that?
No, you pretty much got it.
Okay, cool.
You pretty much got it all there.
Cool. So you biohacked yourself in 2013, and you were sick, broke, and unemployable. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So basically, when in 2013, I made a big breakthrough in mid 2013, but before that, I just had this myriad of health issues starting from adolescence. So as long as I can remember at 13 already, I was like, I'd eat something, I'd get tired, or I was just tired in the day. And then as I got older, kind of started getting worse, but I was like eating healthier. I was being healthier. So I was kind of mitigating a lot of it. And, at the age of like 24 and 25, it just caught up with me. It was like I was trying some different diets, and I was actually trying a high-fat diet, and I did horrible. It caused I had a meltdown from it. Now,
Is this high-fat keto?
No, it wasn't keto, and I don't want to necessarily diss high-fat diets because I do have a higher fat diet now. I wouldn't say it's as high as my experiments where I was just like trying to add fat to everything. But I do think, you need, it depends on the person's genes and things like that. But, and their state. So I wasn't in the state where I was ready for that. And so basically and I was also eating, foods that were, at the time I didn't even know it, but they were, causing inflammation for me. And that combination of like inflammation from food and just a mismatch in my lifestyle and diet and what I was supposed to be doing, it just caused, I was doing a lot of other things. I was like going to school. It basically caused me to flunk out of that semester. I just failed all my courses. Wow. I was like, and then I was just like, damn, I need to fix myself here. I can't let this, I got to get to the root cause of everything. And I was already reading on like blogs and different things back then, trying to understand what was happening. But the issue was that nobody was really telling you like what the root cause was. They would talk about the root cause, and then maybe they'll say like, toxins, mold, or whatever it is. But if you don't understand the biological mechanisms, you're not going to understand what suits what person. Because one guy would be talking about mold. I won't say his name, but we all know who it is.
At least those of us familiar with biohacking.
Yeah. One guy's talking about mold, and I'm looking at him and I'm saying, I really believe that mold is his issue, but how do I know it's my issue?
Yeah.
And the only way you can know, okay, whose issue is what, is to understand the nuts and bolts of the body, and then understand what's happening. And so I came to a realization that I'm not going to fix these problems by just listening necessarily to broad recommendations. One guy will say this, one guy will say that. You need to have some mechanisms as well to know, okay, you're sensitive to mold, and now I know why you're sensitive to mold, but I don't have these genes or I don't have these symptoms that show that I have the same problems as you. What would help me? And that's when I started embarking on, on like really understanding the differences between, what the difference, like between me and let's say Dave Asprey, and now actually I could say, after 3.5 years of really being engrossed, I can tell you exactly what the biological differences are between me and Dave Asprey. My system is built in X, Y, and Z way, and I can go through the nuts and bolts, and I can, based on his symptoms and based on what I know about him, I can tell you what his system is, and then there's going to be different recommendations based on his system and my system.
Gotcha. And so through this process, you figured out what was going wrong with you, and then you figured out how to fix it.
Yeah, so through this process, I figured out the nuts and bolts of my system. Now I understand exactly from the receptors, from the brain parts, from the physical parts, what is going on. And I also tied it back into the lifestyle and dietary agents that may be problematic for these factors. And so, once you understand the factors, or if you understand first what the agents are, you can also infer what the factors are. The nuts and bolts that are causing the issues.
Cool.
And then also, obviously, your genes are able to help you if you have an idea, especially if you have an idea. So it can go both ways. Number one is, if you have an idea what the problem is, you can start to look at your genes and say, are any of these genes a problem? Number two is you could look at your genes and say, this makes sense maybe because I'm having all these symptoms.
Gotcha.
So that was kind of phase two. Phase one was self-hack. It was like, I first need to figure this out. And so I would research something and I say, you know what, I might as well put this online.
Yeah.
So I did, research and writing. And then what I realized was there's this whole genetic world exploding and we have all this information, but the tools that I was using were just beyond bad. It wasn't even like bad. It was like beyond bad. They weren't like giving you information. It was a very tiny subset of genes. It was like, here's 10 genes and absolutely no information, no references, and anything that they did give you, I was just like, this is so complex. The studies are actually less complex than what they're telling me, because the studies at least give you a broad picture. They're giving you a slight snapshot, and it's like, this is just gibberish.
Yeah.
So that's when I, started to think about doing genetics. And then, so I started, first my idea was to build a program, at least give people content that they can understand. Give them genes and content that they can understand. And then I said, it kept on like, I kept on, okay, well, we're only giving, 1,000 genes. I want to give all the genes. And then, and then it got more complex. And then I'm like, okay, we need to simplify it and then give it to people in different ways. So we've been working on this for about 1.5 years. And, we're building out a whole variety of tools that people can biohack themselves in all manners of ways. So, more comprehensive, more curated content that people can understand it better. And then also combine it with recommendations so people know what to do with that information. And also you need to combine it with blood tests, symptoms, and other kinds of health data, like a symptom checklist. I can know what pathways in your body are not working. And based on that, it's like, okay, this pathway is not working. We can compare it to your genes. There's a whole list of supplements for that pathway. And so we want to make it like this complete biohacking suite, where either biohackers or other individuals or functional medicine doctors can come and really understand what's going on, and also have targeted recommendations for individuals.
Beautiful. So I want to get into that more, the nuts and bolts around how genes interact with different lifestyle interventions, how that influences our specifically energy levels and fatigue, how it all ties in. But real quick, just as a quick side point, you had mentioned biohacking a couple times. Obviously, you and I both know what that is, but not everybody knows what that is. some people get scared off by that term, and some people think it's like, installing microchips into your body and stuff like that. So can you just do a quick explanation of what biohacking is for people?
Well, I guess there's no standardized definition, but I can give you what my take is on it. It's basically taking your health into your own hands to a certain extent, and it's using a broader set of tools than you would normally think of as like, okay, the normal set of tools is you go to a doctor, they either give you a drug or they don't. So it's using a broader set of tools, which includes lifestyle, diet, supplements, or, and for some people, drugs as well. And testing it out on yourself and seeing how it works for you. In my definition, I think, there's smarter biohackers who will try to understand the issue first, and then unless they do this as a profession like myself, where I'm just like, I feel like I need to try everything. I don't necessarily recommend that to other people because you will get side effects, especially if, like I'll try high doses sometimes. I'll do reckless things, but if you're just like a consumer or someone who wants to just live a normal life, it makes sense to have a more targeted biohacking approach where you try things that that have a higher probability of getting the results you want. And the result of biohacking is to perform better. So the end results are you're happier, your mood is better, you have more energy, you get more out of life.
Yeah. So for anyone that was scared off by the term biohacker, I just want to point out that if you're interested in using lifestyle strategies to improve your health or your energy level or your lifespan, you are a biohacker by this definition. So
exactly.
So don't be scared off by that term. So with that said, and kind of understanding your background and your frame of reference and the kind of the approach and paradigm that you take to this, talk to me a little bit about the main causes of fatigue and why somebody would be lacking energy.
Okay, yeah. So with any issue that I come across, you want to look at a bigger picture first, because if someone has fatigue and then they have 8 other symptoms, then you need to, it's going to completely change the game rather than if someone just has fatigue. So I can tell you in my clients, I have a questionnaire and I give them a list of symptoms, and that allows me to see if a certain system is broken, and that I call the limbic system. The limbic system is a group of organs in the brain, like the hypothalamus, the thalamus, the amygdala, the cingulate, and the hippocampus. So these are parts of the limbic system. And the limbic system basically is your emotional system, and it's also very involved with wakefulness. So you want to see if someone's limbic system is just off. And if their limbic system is off, then it's going to be a different set of like reasons why they're fatigued. So I'll just give you a quick list of things like how someone would know if they have a limbic system problem. So are they getting fatigue after meals? Number one. Or chronic fatigue. So both of them can be a problem. Brain fog. How is their processing speed? Do they also have anxiety? Do they have OCD or problems letting go of thoughts or thinking about the future too much? Are they getting hypoglycemic? Do they have gut problems? Do they procrastinate a lot? Do they have problems with motivation? Do they have cold hands or feet? And do they have poor deteriorating memory? Inability to tolerate stress, depressed mood, insomnia, low blood pressure, and things like that. And then a lot of these people also feel tired but wired at night. So those are some of the main clusters of symptoms that you see with people who have a deranged limbic system. Now, the interesting thing is actually that, so as part of the limbic system is very, the reason why it's a system is because it's very intertwined. And if one thing is not working, the whole system can be out of whack. So, the hypothalamus is going to connect to the hippocampus, and everything is very interconnected. The central part of the limbic system, I would say, is in the hypothalamus. That's the central part. And in the hypothalamus, there's another central part. It's called the lateral hypothalamus. And, the whole hypothalamus is important, but I'd say a relatively recent discovery that I haven't mentioned this anywhere is the lateral hypothalamus is actually the most important. And I knew about it for a while because I had a post on orexin. You type in orexin, it's going to be one of the top results on Google. So I wrote that post in 2014, actually. So the orexin system is based in the lateral hypothalamus, and I realized orexin was matching up to all of these symptoms. Now, it turns out, though, that the lateral hypothalamus, which is the base for orexin, basically interacts with all of these symptoms, even like cold hands or feet, gut problems. There's a connection. There's a pretty, direct connection between the lateral hypothalamus and all of these problems. So the answer is that to understand the mechanism of fatigue, it's, orexin is this peptide that is basically like a neurotransmitter where, you have this set of neurons in the lateral hypothalamus, and the neurotransmitter is just, a chemical that transmits signals from one neuron to another in order to, communicate. It's just an interneuron communication messenger. So it's the lateral hypothalamus which is causing communication. And so the lateral hypothalamus is, in cases of fatigue, is not working. And often there's a cluster of symptoms because it happens to be the lateral hypothalamus is responsible for everything. Now, if somebody just has fatigue without all the rest of these issues, it means that it might not be a lateral hypothalamic issue. It might just be that the person has a general mitochondrial issue, right? They're just, they just don't have the energy. It could just be there's a hormonal issue, right? They just have really low testosterone or really low pregnenolone, or, there could be something more specific going on. But if it's these cluster of symptoms that I spoke about, then it means that the lateral hypothalamus and the limbic system in general is going to be impacted. And then the question becomes, well, what causes those issues? Mm-hmm. So should I go into that now?
Yeah. Okay. Unless you want to, I guess there's a point of divergence here. You can either go down more specifics on, the limbic system, or give more of an overview of the other potential causes, wherever you want to go.
Well, so I first wanted to go with the neural structure and the neurotransmitters of fatigue, just so people get the general understanding and how to contrast it maybe with other types of fatigue. Again, like if you're just having an energy problem, or like, for example, if the circadian rhythm, right? If your circadian rhythm is completely messed up, and it might not be problem necessarily in your lateral hypothalamus. It might just, like, by the way, the circadian rhythm, as you know, is based in the hypothalamus and the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And those areas are very close together. The hypothalamus is a tiny part in the brain. And so there's obviously communication there. But if someone's circadian rhythm is terrible, right? Or if they're just not sleeping, right? Their sleep quality is terrible. It's obviously going to be a different kind of problem. They usually won't get necessarily the full cluster of other symptoms. Mm-hmm. So I think now the question is, well, what causes these limbic system problems? And if I had to choose one area, one kind of receptor or one kind of system, it's more of a system instead of like one particular receptor. I would say, and I actually haven't told any non-clients this yet. So I haven't put it out that much. It's the cannabinoid system.
Ah, cool. I'm glad you brought that up because I saw your recent post on that. I was going to ask you.
Exactly. It was my recent post, but it's hard to communicate everything in writing. So I think, this podcast or webinar is suited to talk about this. If you look at, so nobody, actually, the interesting thing is nobody has ever mentioned really the cannabinoid system in any meaningful way in dealing with in these issues in general. I mean, maybe they talk about pot or something, or like, you know, pot can help you in this way, or CBD. CBD is becoming big.
Yeah, it's usually talked about in the context of just CBD. And
CBD, yeah.
what was
CBD
cool about your recent article is you're kind of talking about it like there's this whole system and there's lots of things that affect it. It's not just, you know, a CBD deficiency.
Right, yeah, exactly. It's not a CBD deficiency, although CBD can help the system in a variety of ways. So people don't even know exactly why CBD is working for people. They just say, oh, it's good. Right. You know, they see correlation, CBD. And, you know, it's interesting, but when you don't understand that the cannabinoid system is the root cause, CBD just becomes like, you know, another supplement.
Right.
And also there's actually, I'm actually experimenting with a substance that I don't see anyone else taking because I understand the mechanisms. And I've only taken it once and it had very interesting effects.
What's that?
And I don't want to recommend it. I could mention it here, but I don't want to recommend it yet.
Well, it's too much of a teaser to say all that without telling us what it is.
Okay, so beta-caryophyllene.
Never heard of it.
Yeah. It's the only full agonist for the CB2 receptor. And the CB2 receptor is mainly not psychoactive. So it doesn't give you all those cannabinoid effects, but it's a very potent anti-inflammatory. And it's something that gave me very, very unique effects that were generally positive. And the question is how, you know, the dosing, sourcing the right product, who would be, you know, who should take this product. And so I don't want to give advice on that right now.
Sure.
But I think that's what's interesting. The interesting thing is in the research, there's like, you know, there's only very few full agonists of the CB2 receptor, the cannabinoid 2 receptor, and that's one of them. And when they tested on the studies, this one is actually way more effective. And so we're talking about, like, you know, they'll use research chemicals and in order to see like the full effect of things. But usually it's like the research chemical is not something that's found in basically all spices. You know, they usually have some synthetic chemical or some weird chemical that often causes a lot of side effects. That's the thing with beta-caryophyllene. I haven't researched a full side effect profile or anything like that, but I do know that it's found in like found in a lot of plants and all spices, pretty much. So I know it's not necessarily going to kill me or anything like that.
Sure. And let me just interrupt you real quick, because I know that some people who maybe don't have a strong background in science probably feel overwhelmed right now with talk of like CB receptors and, you know, CB1, CB2, and the endocannabinoid system. So just kind of can you zoom out for a minute and talk a little kind of overview of what that system's all about?
Yeah. So you know, when I realized you kind of compare once I was doing research on the cannabinoid system, and the interesting thing is, before I get into that, the reason I focused on the cannabinoid system is a few things. Number one is I was just reading passively about the cannabinoid system here and there. There's just things, you know, in my brain passing by, and one of the genes I found that was that one of my bad genes happened to be a cannabinoid 1 receptor gene. And for me, it was only 2% of the population have that variety. And I said, okay, this is relatively uncommon. And again, I said, you know, I knew what the cannabinoid system did. And then I started looking at clients with that gene, and I realized most clients have that gene too. And you wouldn't predict it from just like chance or anything, because it's not that common in the population. Now, most clients would have 1 copy, and that could cause some problems. I had 2 copies, so for me it was way worse. And that kind of feeds into what I call, you know, lectin sensitivity, or just sensitivity to a lot of different agents. So going into the cannabinoid system, one thing that I was researching was, okay, where are these cannabinoid receptors most concentrated in? Turns out they're most concentrated in the limbic system and the hypothalamus, and even more in the lateral hypothalamus. And the cannabinoid system and the orexin system are so intertwined, actually, which is something that, again, it's more of a relatively recent finding. I haven't really discussed it too in depth on the blog. Basically, this whole paper, I reference a paper in the post. It's just talking about the interconnection between the cannabinoid and orexin system, and there's tons of references and things like that.
Okay.
It is very, very intertwined, and pretty much everything orexin does has an effect in some way on the cannabinoid system too. They're very closely related. In the research, they'll say there's like a co-localization of these receptors, which means that these two receptors are found in the same neurons often. And if you look at the functions of orexin, if you look at the functions of the cannabinoid, they happen to be very similar. So I'll give you one example of the beta-caryophyllene that I noticed. And again, I think it's a matter of dosing, the time that I took it. That night, I was extremely awake. And the interesting thing is, normally if I'm awake and I don't get that much sleep, the next day I feel like crap. And it's like, well, I'm not getting enough sleep, so I understand why I'm not feeling so great. This time I got like 6 hours of sleep, and I didn't even notice, like, at all, zero. And so that was a very interesting effect that I found. But it's something that, again, I have to experiment more with. I have to verify and see just to make sure. But the CB1 and the CB1 receptor is more psychoactive. The CB2 receptor's main function is a potent anti-inflammatory. And here's another thing. What's very interesting. The way the body works is kind of like a chain. There's like one connection goes to another connection. And so, like we discussed, orexin is very intertwined with the cannabinoid system. And the cannabinoid system is very intertwined with the immune system and the gut. And so people are also having immune system issues, and they're also having gut problems and things like that. So, like, for example, something that I noticed is that I'm Th1 and Th17 dominant. What that means is there's T cells. They're kinds of lymphocytes. So it's like white blood cells, lymphocytes, T cells, T helper cells, and certain subsets of T helper cells. So that's what the Th1 and Th17 is. What I noticed is that I'm Th1 and Th17 dominant, which means that I have higher levels of these cells. And the most potent way to suppress these cells is actually through the cannabinoid system. So that's where the immune system meets the cannabinoid system, meets orexin, and they're all closely intertwined because, as you know, inflammation inhibits orexin.
Right.
And and again, orexin is closely tied with the cannabinoid system. Interestingly, actually, inflammation increases the cannabinoid receptors in order to counteract the inflammation. That's how the body works. Like, you have inflammation, the body says, we need to take this down. Let's increase the cannabinoid receptors so that they're more sensitive, and so that we can decrease inflammation. Which is interesting also because, like, for example, if I've been like pretty strict with my diet for like 6 months or something. I'm pretty decent. I have breaks here and there. But what was interesting is like I kept it for like 6 months, and then I wasn't being healthy. I wasn't doing things that would support my cannabinoid system. And then I just said, like, let me just try like this, whatever, this thing that I know I'll react to. I got such a strong reaction that I realized it was because my cannabinoid system was not increased. Whereas, like, let's say 3.5 years ago, I would have eaten it. I had more problems, but I wouldn't have noticed it as much because, again, the body can compensate. So it sees this as inflammation. It's going to increase the cannabinoid system. And so my cannabinoid system, I just kind of like let the ball go, and it wasn't, you know, and I'll give you one example of how I let the ball go. One thing that increases the cannabinoid system, there's actually a bunch of chemicals that, or natural ways to increase it. One is butyrate. I stopped taking like high maize or those kinds of things. And those actually increase the cannabinoid system, the CB1 receptors. And, you know, a variety of other things that I was doing that I was not increasing my receptors. And at the same time, I didn't have inflammation for a long time. So my cannabinoid receptors were low, plus genetic susceptibilities. Boom, just like complete chaos. I was like, whoa, I've never felt this, you know, I've never felt this tired, or it was like I never felt like so little motivation in the last year or you know, in the past like 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. So that's something very interesting. Okay, but getting back to it.
So real quick, so the relationship of the cannabinoid system to orexin is there a fairly simple relationship that can be kind of summarized? Like, is there a direct effect of like stimulating the cannabinoid system does so and so to orexin?
So stimulating the cannabinoid system does stimulate orexin.
Okay.
There is no simple, like, but the other thing is it might be a little tricky, because if you smoke pot, you get tired. That's because of other reasons, though. It's not because of orexin.
Right.
So, and I actually think that my suspicion, you know, I suspect that, for example, you smoke pot at night, you will go to sleep, generally speaking. If you're, you know, most people will go to sleep, but you'll wake up feeling like tired the next day. It's not improving the sleep quality in some ways, and some of that might be because like orexin is being activated. It's having very significant impacts on your circadian rhythm. It's causing like phase delays of your circadian rhythm, and so yeah, I think, but it does like stimulate orexin.
Okay, gotcha. So to zoom out, so we're talking about causes of fatigue. First one, kind of limbic system issues. And then second one, I guess somewhat related to this still, is the cannabinoid system. Yeah.
Okay. So that's also where kind of like one of the it feeds into like one of the root causes of fatigue, which would be like anxiety or stress. Mm-hmm. So if you're stressed out for a while, either acutely or chronically, it actually decreases the cannabinoid receptors.
Okay. And so stress and anxiety directly impact on
it directly decreases the cannabinoid receptors. It makes you less sensitive to the natural cannabinoids within your system. And
so how is that going to impact on energy levels and fatigue?
So first of all, like, you know, stress can kind of, so if you have lower levels of orexin, you know, again, orexin is going to be responsible for motivation, cognitive function, memory, just like all these things, or just energy. You know, the orexin basically impacts all these energy systems. So if your orexin system is not functioning, if the lateral hypothalamus is not functioning, it's and if the limbic system in general is not functioning, it will cause fatigue. Mm-hmm. And so if you have excess anxiety or lots of stress, it will feed into the orexin system. And it'll cause a reduction in the orexin system overall. And this you know, there's probably other you know, like for example, you know, there's probably other mechanisms by which it can cause fatigue. Another thing is, I would say, with like stress, is the impact on the serotonin receptors. Mm-hmm. So there's 5-HT1A, 5-HT2A, 5-HT2C, and Selfdecode has these genes actually. And so the interesting thing is, again, I kind of piece information from multiple threads. It's like one day I'm reading something about the HTR2A gene, which is the serotonin receptor gene, and I'm reading, wow, this has to do with like chronic fatigue syndrome. People with chronic fatigue syndrome are more likely to have fatigue, you know, more likely to have chronic fatigue syndrome. And so actually there is a connection between the serotonin receptors and anxiety as well, and wakefulness as well. So I would say, you know, I'm still looking into all the exact connections there, but there's definitely some effect when it comes to anxiety on the cannabinoid system, on the serotonin system. And I'd say that's what anxiety has to do with. Then inflammation is going to be another very significant cause. And inflammation is known in the research to just suppress orexin straight up.
Yeah.
Especially when inflammation is combined with carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
If you just, I'm a believer that if you just take in carbohydrates, you shouldn't be getting tired.
Yeah.
Now, if you have some inflammation or if you have mitochondrial issues, then you will get tired. You might get tired with inflammation, and I would say I'm a test case for that, right?
Yeah.
We get extremely tired from a small amount of carbohydrates.
Still,
and even without any immune stimulants. So again, like for example,
is that still the case, Joe, or is that
no? Not at all. No, I can have as much carbohydrates as I want. I don't get tired.
Okay, good.
I mean, the point. But I have to be careful in the sense that I can't take carbohydrates that will cause inflammation for me.
Right.
Because it happens to be that most of the foods with carbohydrates are also have many immune stimulants. They're like basically carbohydrates are found in plants.
Yeah. And
plants contain the immune stimulants. So it's hard for people to differentiate. Am I getting tired from carbohydrates or am I getting tired from the lectins and other immune stimulants in these foods?
Right.
So I do fine with unlimited carbohydrates. I mean, there's a limit though, because having there's very limited amounts of carbohydrates I can eat. Basically, raw honey is the only, and certain varieties of it are the only type of carbohydrate that I don't get fatigue from.
Wow.
Meaning that's the only one that doesn't have the immune stimulants that interact negatively with my body. So if I want to eat like 100 grams of honey, I can, but again, you don't want to eat like 200 grams of honey. This doesn't work. So yeah. I haven't tried like higher limits, but I know if I ate like 50 grams of carbs when I was getting inflammation, I would be floored. And I even tried, I'll tell you, there was one point where I just tried like 5 grams of glucose and I was like, whoa, I'm like really tired now.
Wow.
It's nothing, right? So yeah, definitely. So carbohydrates, you have to look at, again, like first principles, nuts and bolts, what is going to cause the suppression of orexin? Carbohydrates, inflammation, and what's called energy-related molecules in the hypothalamus, in the lateral hypothalamus. And they've done studies on this too, like ATP. So when there's ATP, if you have enough energy in the lateral hypothalamus, your brain, the orexin system will not shut down even when there's glucose present. Now, if you don't have energy, or if there's inflammation, which will deplete the energy there, glucose will make you tired. So, that's why you have to look at kind of the whole system. You have to see like, okay, somebody's getting tired. Are they also getting inflammation? Do they have mitochondrial issues? Things like that. And something that you speak about, and it's really important, is like exercise. If you're not exercising, you will have mitochondrial issues.
Yeah. Pretty much guaranteed. Yeah.
So exercise will stimulate all these genes that are important for energy production, things like that. And through that mechanism, that will, it'll help with your hormones and things like that. It will reduce inflammation. And so through these kind of indirect mechanisms, many of them, exercise will help with energy production and being more awake for most people. Now, there's some people who have exercise intolerance, different ballgame though.
Yeah. Okay. So main causes. Give me kind of the overview of the main causes that we've talked about so far. So limbic system, cannabinoid system, inflammation.
Yeah. So let me break it up and let me parse it in different ways. One is, where in the brain is this fatigue happening? Or, what are the neurotransmitters? And that's the lateral hypothalamus and the general limbic system and orexin. That's the main system. And histamine is another system within the brain, but it feeds in, very closely with orexin. So, just to simplify, it's basically orexin is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. And then the question is, what receptors or what pathways in the body are interacting with this system? By far, the cannabinoid system is the most important. And then you have other things as well, like serotonin receptors and things like that. And then, then it's going to be general kind of like things that, general health, like, having less inflammation, but that gets into what would I say are the biggest causes of the orexin system and the limbic system not working, or these receptors not working, and that is sleep. So a lot of people have sleep problems. Either they're not sleeping enough, or their sleep quality is not great. Very important, right? They're ways, and the other ones is going to be inflammation and an overactive nervous system, like a lot of stress. So those are like the root factors that are causing these biological factors to not work. And I discussed inflammation, why that works, why that causes fatigue. Anxiety really destroys the cannabinoid system, and it can affect the serotonin receptors. And the circadian rhythm is very close to the cannabinoid system, is very close to the lateral hypothalamus, and that again feeds very closely with wakefulness. And then sleep. Now, there's other things, of course, that are very important. For example, like that, you discussed like light, the importance of light. Obviously, so for example, light will increase orexin. It'll go through the suprachiasmatic nucleus from your eye to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and again, it'll affect the whole hypothalamus and increase dopamine receptors. So there's a DRD2 receptor that dopamine can help with wakefulness. Modafinil increases dopamine, things like that. Amphetamines are dopaminergics. And so, on Selfdecode, we have the DRD2 receptors. Some people's receptors are not working that well. That kind of feeds into fatigue, and especially light aspects. I haven't seen, so the thing is actually, something that's very interesting is how sun interacts with the cannabinoid system in an indirect way, right? So somebody's getting outside in the sun, getting light. The sun potently increases nitric oxide, and you can feel it. Like if you haven't gotten sun in a long time, you go in the sun, you get this burst of nitric oxide, and it's just very relaxing.
Yeah,
that's what a burst of nitric oxide feels like. It has like this kind of sedating effect, and it just increases blood flow throughout your body. Nitric oxide actually increases the cannabinoid receptors. So in that sense, again, it's like everything in the body is really interconnected. In that sense, the sun can increase the cannabinoid receptors. I'm not sure if light directly can increase the cannabinoid receptors, but I know it increases the dopamine D2 receptors, and that will interact with wakefulness systems as well.
Right.
No question about it.
It's not all about mold.
No, exactly. But we do know that light does increase orexin. So that would be how light would increase wakefulness. So if you're out in the light and you're getting sun, you're going to increase your dopamine D2 receptors. You're going to increase orexin. Through the nitric oxide, you're going to help your cannabinoid system. So that's going to be really important. Cool. So I could put like lack of light or lack of sun kind of in causing these kinds of issues because of those pathways.
Yeah.
You talk about exercise. I would say like exercise is just extremely diverse in what it can do. So it's just doing a lot of little things that are helping,
Yeah, and also stimulates the nitric oxide element.
It also stimulates, exactly. Yeah. Increases blood flow, nitric oxide, all these things. And, it's just like a bunch of these mechanisms are going to help you in different ways.
Right.
And then, nutrition, as far as that, it's going to be like carbs. If your mitochondria are not working as well as they should, if you're having inflammation or stuff like that, or if you just eat tons of carbs, right? Everybody's going to have a different carb tolerance for different reasons. Right.
Okay. So I want to get into like kind of more directly your wheelhouse around genetics. And I want people to really get this concept of how a gene analysis tool like Selfdecode can actually translate into like them doing certain things in their life which positively impact their life or enhance their health, their energy level. So talk to me a little bit about what are some of the most important genes. I know you've already mentioned a bunch of them, but can you just kind of give me an overview of maybe the top 5 or so or 10 genes, along with what kinds of information they will get from analyzing them, and then how does that translate into maybe different interventions that can be used to benefit their life?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, there's a when it comes to fatigue, there could be a variety of genes, doing different things. But as far as the cannabinoids, we have so we have individual pages and different ways to view the information that an individual could look at. You can also see like if you have less common varieties of certain genes, so they'll pop up as red, and then you can click an information button and see what that means for you. It'll give you allele specific information for you. So for example, when I found the cannabinoid receptor 1 gene, there was one SNP that was, we also give importance levels. So one SNP had a lot of research on it, and we'll give it higher importance. So CNR1 it's called, and then the CNR2 for the cannabinoid receptor 2. You want to see, it would be about looking at, you can either look at individual genes, or you can look at, we combine genes or SNPs together in certain packs that you can look at. So it'll be like, circadian rhythm, sleep, things like that. So like I discussed, the DRD2, there's also nicotinic receptors that can interact wakefulness. So for example, and also cognitive function as well. The nicotinic receptors also, increase wakefulness as nicotine does. Nicotine increases orexin. It also increases the cannabinoid system through a variety of means, which is very interesting. Mm-hmm. And I actually do well with nicotine, and I do well with, obviously it increases wakefulness, but it was very interesting to see that it increases the cannabinoid system too.
Yeah, that is interesting. I've actually, as far as stimulants go, I much prefer nicotine to caffeine.
Yeah, for sure. Same here. Same here. And so.
And just to clarify for people, I'm not talking about smoking cigarettes. I'm talking about nicotine gum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I do.
Picturing me smoking cigarettes to get a stimulant effect from.
Exactly.
nicotine.
Yeah. I don't either smoke cigarettes. I mean, the harmful effects of cigarettes are obviously the toxins released from burning the tobacco.
Yeah.
That's almost all of it. Nicotine is not a pure saint. There are like any drug is going to be some side effects, but pretty much it's there's way more benefits than drawbacks. But I do have a comprehensive post on that. So nicotine and galantamine, if you wanted to go that route, there's the alpha 7 and alpha 4 nicotinic receptors, and these heavily influence wakefulness and working memory. And so these, there's a whole bunch of genes that I look at. They're called CHRNA, and then there's 3, 5, 7. So you would want to look at those genes in terms of like they might have, if you're having some working memory issues or wakefulness issues, some of those might have some effect. Another one is a very interesting one is the ADA gene, the adenosine deaminase gene. Mm-hmm. It's an enzyme that takes inosine and creates adenosine. It takes adenosine and creates inosine. And if it's not working that well, you're going to have a buildup of adenosine.
Yeah, which is going to lead to fatigue.
Yeah, the way that another aspect of the fatigue system is when adenosine, basically as you burn energy throughout the day, adenosine builds up. And so for a guy like me, adenosine is going to build up quicker because I'm not converting that adenosine to inosine. And
because of your activity of your ADA.
Yeah. Okay. It's lower activity. So the end result of that in the studies are if people sleep less, they're going to be more tired the next day because, again, they just have more adenosine in their system. They're probably going to be more tired in general. I mean, but, you know, if your system is working, you're not going to be tired. So you can't just blame fatigue on that gene, but it definitely is associated with like cognitive performance and fatigue the next day if you don't sleep well. And so that was a very interesting gene that I found. And it's not that common, like 5% of the population will have one of those variations, or 5 to 10%. So you might want to check that one, the ADA gene. And there's different fixes. For each gene that we have like fixes. How can you increase this gene? How can you decrease it? And what are some natural ways? And, you know, we have variety of different tools to see how you can modulate these genes. Another one would be, so this is actually a very popular one as far as like athletic performance, is PPAR delta. PPAR is actually one of the critical systems that differentiate between people. And in general, if we want to walk back a little, the nuclear receptors and the transcription factors, as they call them, it's just transcription factor is a gene that reads that causes the expression of a lot of other genes. And so these systems are going to have broad effects on the body. And this is one of the ways I categorize people as well. So, you know, by different PPARs, people will have either low or high levels. And so I like to look at PPAR alpha, PPAR delta, and PPAR gamma. Those are the three main ones. And then there's PGC1 alpha, or the gene is called PPAR GCA1.
And all of those tie into mitochondrial health. And
exactly.
Biogenesis.
Exactly. Fat burning, mitochondrial health, things like that. And just energy production in general. With PPAR gamma, it's more anti-inflammatory. And so I have low levels. You know, Bulletproof is going to have high levels of PPAR gamma, which means that if he takes an omega-6, he's going to gain weight. Because omega-6
By the way, did you just refer to Dave Asprey as Bulletproof?
Yeah, Bulletproof.
Is that his name?
That's what I call him.
Okay, cool. Sorry, go ahead.
You know, so he's a good guy because to talk about, because a lot of people know him, and he's very vocal about his you know, his health history. So you know, you can, if you read about him or whatever, you can see, okay, what is this guy talking about? He has a lot of very specific recommendations, which I think are very suited for his biology. And so for an example, people will say, like, are omega-6 is bad? The answer is omega-6s actually can help activate the cannabinoid system, and they also help activate PPAR gamma. And I was always thinking, you know, I don't do that badly with omega-6s. I actually think I do pretty well.
Yeah, I think the same. I mean, many years ago, I went through a phase where I was avoiding them like the plague, and I thought that, you know, omega-6s were the devil. But now I actually eat quite a lot of nuts and seeds, and I find that I react very well to them.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, I mean, I react to most plant-based foods, so I don't do well with nuts or seeds. But if I just take the oils, I mean, I generally don't react negatively to them, and in general, it's more positive. So the reason for me is because I have lower PPAR gamma, lower cannabinoid system. And by the way, part of the cannabinoid, the way this goes with the cannabinoid system, PPAR gamma, they're also very interconnected. The cannabinoid system actually activates PPAR gamma. There's this whole web. And so both the cannabinoid and the PPAR gamma cause like increased weight gain. So you know, somebody, like, when they give you when they give people something that blocks the cannabinoid receptors, they lose weight. And again, that's why it's part of it. Like, a lot of my clients tell me I can't gain weight. And the answer is, you're never going to gain weight if your cannabinoid system is not working. And they don't understand, the in-depth mechanisms. But what I could say is, you know, it obviously, if you can't gain weight and you're having these limbic system problems, I can tell you for sure your cannabinoid system is broken. Whereas then you have these people who say, I can't lose weight, right? And that's obviously also a very large section of people. So the question is, why are these people different? How are they so different? One person saying I can't gain weight, one person saying I can't lose weight. it has to do with the PPAR gamma and the cannabinoid systems.
Hmm.
So yeah, so basically, so let's see, where are we gonna, as far as so people, and these are also anti-inflammatory systems. What I noticed is when people when it's easy for people to gain weight, those people generally have less issues with inflammation in a lot of ways, which was a very interesting thing that I realized early on. I just didn't understand why. That has to do with PPAR gamma. A lot of it has to do with PPAR gamma and the cannabinoid system. And so you can check for genes with PPAR gamma. You can check for genes for PPAR delta, PPAR alpha, and a lot of these transcription factors actually compete with one another. So if you have high levels of PPAR delta, it will compete with the other ones, the other PPARs. In general, what will increase generally all of them is the PGC1 alpha, and that will help mitochondrial function. That's something that generally everybody does well with. So there's genes for that. There's genes for the other PPARs, like I said. Now, PPAR delta is they found like some PPAR delta genes, you're like 8 times more likely to be an extreme athlete or like perform better in athletics and things like that. And that's because it helps with like energy production and stuff like that.
By the way, on that note, there was a compound that I was interested in called
I know what you're going to say.
Cardarine.
What was it?
Cardarine?
Exactly, yeah.
That's GW, whatever,
Exactly.
504.
Yeah.
71.
I have a post on that, actually, I think.
Yeah, I saw it. But I know that it looks to me like it has some really fascinating effects, and I do see quite a lot of people taking it.
But there's risks.
Yeah, but then there's the cancer issue, and that's what has stopped me from taking it. But
Sure.
I'm very curious about how somebody with fatigue due to mitochondrial dysfunction would do with something like that.
That's an interesting question. I think the fatigue for mitochondrial function, they'll want to focus on the PGC1 alpha. Really going selective with the PPAR delta is going to crowd out some other things. So that again gets to PPAR. Like, for example, if you're PPAR delta dominant, you're going to crowd out the PPAR gamma, PPAR alpha, and those are also really beneficial. Just happens to be PPAR delta is more specific for athletic performance and things like that. And so I can't imagine that, some negative side effects will occur. Kind of same with the cannabinoid system. There's no such thing as like one thing that's just great all around, generally speaking. Like the fact that I had a lower cannabinoid system allowed me to be very, very muscular without really working out.
Interesting.
And also, again, it also interacts with AMPK. PPAR gamma is going to interact with AMPK and SIRT1, which is like the energy production pathways and mitochondrial enhancement pathways. So, for example, people don't know it, but like the SIRT1 and the AMPK can actually inhibit the PPAR gamma.
Oh, interesting.
So some people can have higher levels of that. And that was interesting too, because I noticed I had some genes that were associated with higher SIRT1, which was very interesting because I'm like, well, SIRT1 is great. Why am I still having, why am I genetically not able to eat normal food? And the answer is that pathway can actually inhibit the anti-inflammatory PPAR gamma pathway.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So, yeah.
So give me like maybe 3 more genes.
Some more genes. So again, there's the SIRTs. There's just SIRT1, SIRT3. Those are going to have to do with energy production. NPSR1 actually is a gene that has to it's associated with like high orexin. Again, so you want to see what your SNPs are there. There's PDE4D gene, which is, again, if you have high levels of that, it can cause decreased cyclic AMP, and that can cause decreased energy and fatigue. And so they found that PDE4 inhibitors can increase wakefulness after fatigue, after something, whether it's sleeping less. So that's something that's going to have to do with wakefulness. The adrenergic receptors, the beta and alpha adrenergic receptors, are going to have to do with fatigue and also those genes are related to athletic performance as well. It's kind of like how your adrenaline system is working, and that's also going to feed into the fat burning system, but might not be good in some other ways. It's going to contribute to activation of your nervous system, but that's ADRA2A and ADRB1.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's circadian genes. Again, the circadian rhythm really interacts with the wakefulness system and has to. Actually, in the sleep research, the researchers believe there's two systems. There's a circadian system, and there's one is like a kind of like a build-up system where adenosine's building up, and it's kind of like you're getting more and more tired. But then there's this circadian wakefulness system that's stopping you from going to sleep. And but then all of a sudden that drops off at a certain time if your circadian rhythm, and then you get really tired. So
it's like it allows adenosine to kind of hit you.
Exactly. It allows adenosine to hit you. So it's this wakefulness system that so the circadian rhythm definitely interacts with the whole orexin and wakefulness system, and has to. Mm-hmm. So looking at your circadian rhythm genes, sometimes you'll see different genes for that. Different people will do well, will do poorly with circadian rhythm stuff because of those genes. And those genes, we have like in a SNP analyzer, we have packs. So you can look at whole packs and it'll give you genes associated with different issues. We also have like a search feature now we have in the database. So you can do a disease, you can pick a disease and it gives you all the genes and SNPs related to that disease. And so, but if you want me to just name you a couple, it would be like PER3. The PER is PER3, PER2, PER1. It stands for period, which is like, part of the circadian system, as well as clock genes. These are going to be important for the circadian system as well. And something that I think is really important also for sleep quality is BDNF gene, right? So BDNF actually, part of the reason why exercise helps you sleep better, and with wakefulness in general, again, exercise is kind of that indirect thing often, has all these indirect actions. It'll increase metabolism, increase energy buildup during the day, which will help increase your sleep quality. Exercise will also, it will, so like you said, it was nitric oxide, so all these indirect pathways, but the most important for sleep is that it increases BDNF.
And tell people what BDNF is, just so they know.
BDNF is this neurotrophic, it's this basically like steroid, neurotransmitter / steroid for the brain. It's neuropeptide that increases the growth of neurons, and it does other things in the body as well. So it also increases metabolism, like, it's associated with weight loss and things like that. So that's why, through the BDNF pathway, you're going to have a lot of, different effects. Like, for example, people with certain genes, certain variations, they have less. I actually have one of those, my sleep quality is not going to be as good. So that may be more, that and the ADA gene is definitely contributing to my need for more sleep, or just, like 7.5, 8 hours, which is, people these days don't want to get.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So, I mean, you just gave a ton of different stuff. So, but just to kind of recap and summarize so people can grasp all of this stuff that you just went over. Basically, there's these different genes that they will have kind of varying degrees of. They may have good variations of that particular gene or not so good variations. When it comes to like circadian rhythm genes, or genes like, associated with AMPK and, the PPARs and PGC1 alpha and mitochondrial function and the ability of mitochondria to produce energy, BDNF, the certs, kind of all these different layers. And if you go into Selfdecode,
so if
what
you go into,
happens from there? Like,
okay, so there's a few ways you can find stuff in Selfdecode. Number one is, if there's any gene you want to look at, you can go to, once you have your stuff uploaded, you can just go to selfdecode.com//gene/, you just put the gene name in. Now, for some of them, it'll be like clock, it'll be pretty, it'll be fine. But genes actually have different names, so not always will it click. But like stuff like ADA, PPAR-D, BDNF will actually work. DRD2 will work. So a lot of them will work. Not all of them will work. But we do have, a search feature that you can search for the genes. You can search for them in this kind of report system, which there's a few different ways. There's a few different search features you can do in the system. But beyond that, there's a SNP analyzer, what we call a SNP analyzer, that groups the SNPs together in different ways. In addition, there's different gene packs that we put together that, for example, I'll have my Joe's favorite genes. So if you click on Joe's favorite genes, it will have a lot of, it will have the genes that I mentioned here, like for example. But, we have different categories of genes, like let's say for neurotransmitters. So that's a different way you can look at it. The other way is, and then within the system, you can look at, like, there's this feature that'll give you a list of your bad SNPs. And then while you're looking around, you can bookmark the SNPs. We also have a recommendation system, which we basically scan through all the potentially problematic genes. And then we say, okay, these are the potentially problematic genes. We have a massive database of chemicals, and we categorize them as, whether it's beneficial, natural, and so you can see like the beneficial and natural substances that interact with your genes. And then if you look at that, you could say, this is interesting. I should do more research on this chemical and see, does it make sense for my biology? You can also click on the C interactions, and it'll show you all the genes that it's interacting with, and you can just click on the genes. We're implementing a whole bunch of new systems that constantly make it simpler. For example, one small thing is, right now you could click on the genes, but something that's relatively simple to do is show you show you whether each chemical is increasing a certain gene or decreasing a certain gene within the picture. So then you have this broad picture. You see like SOD2, interesting, increasing. So that's something that we're constantly making it more simple for somebody to upload their genes, and then just and also we're making the recommendation system way more accurate by including symptoms. Now we're working on systems that include other things like symptoms, blood tests, and pathways. Like basically, I give you a checklist, you check things off, and then I can figure out which pathways are not working, and we can weight that into the recommendations. Same with genes, and so we can. Another thing is like we can. We have to, once we weight a lot more factors, it's going to basically keep on getting more accurate. But right now, it's still good in the sense that you can look at it and say, this is interesting. Let me explore this a lot more. And it's that substance that interacts with, most of your genes, the most number of genes that might be problematic. So that's, looking at the recommendation system. It also gives you toxins to stay away from. There's also a recommendation system for if you're concerned about a certain disease, like let's say whatever it is, you can type it in. We have a whole disease database, and it'll give you all the SNPs related to that disease, all the genes. You can click on all the SNPs, all the genes. It'll show you which variations are risky, which ones are less common. To give you, and then you can see all the chemicals that have the most interactions with those diseases. So you can search for a given disease, or you can search for just in general, like what do my genes have to say about just all my genes? Which beneficial chemical interacts with most of my genes? If you're looking for something specific, you want to look at more like a gene pack where we categorize genes by a certain category. But a good place to start is Joe's favorite gene. Right?
I've actually been in there. So, I mean, I've seen you have packs related to, for example, detoxification, and you'll rank somebody like, how do your genes deal with various toxins? How do you do with methylation? Do you
Exactly.
supplement for methylation? How are you as far as your propensity for fat gain? And,
Exactly.
like
So we have, yeah, exactly. So that's part of the SNP analyzer. We actually have a few different, one pack is just giving you like genes, and one pack is giving you kind of like grades and maybe conclusions. Now, we are working on making that system more accurate. But at the very least, you're getting some idea, and you're also getting a list of SNPs and genes that are associated with those kinds of things. And you can click on the individual ones, and just, if you want to explore something more, we give you the tools to do that. So that's a good thing.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure chatting with you. And I also want to mention to people, I've been into Selfdecode. I've bought it myself, and it's phenomenal. So I highly recommend that you go do that. So thank you, Joe. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you, and thanks for sharing so much interesting ideas around how to improve your energy levels.
Awesome. Yeah, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, likewise.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.